The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the 7th day of this essentially 8-day sesshin here, this Rohatsu sesshin at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico in 2022. And we will encourage everyone to sit as long as they can. When I was living and training at Sogenji, the last 2 nights of sesshin, we had 2 hours off if we chose to take them, or we could stay in the zendo. And the first year I was there, I chose to go get a 2-hour nap, which turned out to be a deadly thing to do. And so from then on, the rest of the time I was there, each Rohatsu, I actually stayed up all night long. It was actually easier than taking a short nap, even a 2-hour nap. A 2-hour nap seemed to upset the apple cart in terms of my biorhythms. And so keep that in mind. Of course, everyone is different, but the sesshin, this particular sesshin, is one where we really pull out all the stops. Tomorrow, hopefully everyone has a chance to simply rest, get some exercise, get some extra zazen, and then the next day will be a time to regroup and go back into work. But our schedule will be that tomorrow morning, as usual, we will start chanting at 5. And when we are finished with chanting, we will do sanzen, as we usually do. And then after everyone has had sanzen, we will return to the zendo. The instruments will be put back in place for a final chanting, and we will do the final ceremony. And then that will be officially the end of the formal part of sesshin. Then we will all go into the kitchen and help prepare breakfast and have a good, easy, relaxed breakfast time, a time to relax and enjoy the moment. And then the rest of the day is free. And tomorrow at breakfast, most likely, people will choose to maybe get together and do a hike somewhere or do something with plenty of time for naps, and hopefully also some informal zazen as well, because it's important to do that extra zazen, particularly at the end of a long sesshin. And I will speak for a moment about how important it is after a sesshin, not to just let it all hang out and go off on your merry way and do all kinds of enthusiastic things, which you're likely to feel like doing, by the way, because you will have built up so much what we call joriki, a particular kind of energy that makes us feel like Superman, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. And the thing is, for those of us who are old hands at this, who may have made the mistake in earlier sesshins, we understand that while it may feel like that and may be true for maybe the first day, but along about 2 or 3 days later, if we do indulge in that, we're going to crash and burn. And that's not really what we want to do. We want to protect this fragile energy, this depth that we are reaching through this long sesshin, by getting enough rest, because we probably have not gotten a lot of rest during the sesshin. So replenishing our rest stores and continuing to do zazen, a little more zazen than we would ordinarily be, to take that entry into depth deeper. And then to limit our social contact, really, so that we can we can be relatively quiet in the next week or so to help cement that in place. Because as some of us know from experience, if you rush out and get involved in social activities, going to movies, parties, staying up late, chatting, it's going to backfire a few days later, and you'll find yourself depressed and low energy, and you don't want to do that. The work of this week has been incredibly valuable for everyone. Protect it. Don't give it away easily. Use it to go deeper. And now I would like to share with you some of the profound words of a 9th century Chinese Chan master, Huang Po, who is known in Japan and Japanese as Obaku, and who was Rinzai's teacher. Deeply enlightened human being. And he is pointing to something profound that each one of us can realize. And I'd like to share some of his words here and comment a little bit on them as well. This pure mind, which is the source of all things, the source of all things, this pure mind, which is the source of all things. Behind me is a scroll, and unfortunately, part of it is obscured by the Kannon figure, the Bodhisattva of compassion there. But on the top is an Enso, the circle, Zen circle is sometimes called, which represents our true nature, who we really are, perfect, like a circle. You can't take anything away and still have a circle. You can't add anything and still have a circle. We are perfect as we are. The challenge for us is that we don't necessarily recognize this innate perfection, and so we don't necessarily act out of that innate perfection. So Obaku says, this pure mind, which is the source of all things. In the Chinese calligraphy, Japanese calligraphy, behind us, it says, out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. This mind is the source of all things. This pure mind, which is the source of all things, shines forever with the radiance of its own perfection. But most people are not aware of it and think that the mind is just the faculty that sees, hears, feels, and knows. In fact, we assume that it's up here, stuck in that box called our head. Blinded by their own sight, hearing, feeling, and knowing, they don't perceive the radiance of the source because we're blinded by what we assume we're seeing and hearing. And knowing. It's not necessarily accurate at all. I remember at one point in time when I was really concerned about moving through something I felt was blocking me, and I didn't know what it was. And so the therapist I was seeing at the time suggested I do an extended 4-hour session with a therapist who specialized in what's called short-term psychodynamic therapy, which was, in a word, brutal. I would never suggest that anybody who's had any level of trauma undergo that kind of therapy. Nonetheless, I did. And it was excruciating, but it was also, there was one point in which it was very enlightening because I felt myself pushed more and more and more into a corner, more and more shut down. And at one point, the therapist said something, and I said, "You said such and such." And he said, "No, I didn't." And I realized he was telling the truth. I had misperceived what he had said. I had misunderstood what he had said. And this is a common situation for human beings, particularly anyone who has had challenges in their life. I have spoken in the past in teisho about when I was in grade school, and back then everybody sat in rows silently at their desks, and we did not interact with each other except at recess. But across the aisle from me was a little girl who clearly was in pain. And thinking about it now, I suspect she was being abused. She also had a skin condition that made her skin all rough and patchy. And so I felt her pain. And I wanted to reach over and connect with her and let her know she had a friend. So I reached out and gently touched her arm, at which point she erupted and called out to the teacher and said I was trying to hurt her. That was her perception. My perception was quite the opposite. And human conversation, human interactions are rife with this kind of misunderstanding. We think we know what somebody else is thinking. We think we are perceiving accurately what they are saying or doing. And it depends on how clear and uncaught we are ourselves, whether that perception is anywhere near accurate or not. Because we all see through the lens of our conditioning, our assumptions about ourselves. And interestingly enough, we tend to draw to ourselves situations, reactions of other people that confirm our self-identity. It was quite enlightening when I began to see this in my own life, thanks to my Zen practice and to quite a bit of psychotherapy. This is the case for each one of us. And so when Obaku says we're blinded by our own sight, hearing, and so on and so forth, it's because of that conditioning. So the Zazen, particularly the Susokan, the extended out breath, cuts away that conditioning. It doesn't destroy it, it melts it. It helps us see through it because we become aware of it, and suddenly we become aware of it with more clear sight and are able, because of that, to become more free of it. Let's continue. Blinded by their own sight, hearing, feeling, and knowing, they don't perceive the radiance of the source that we are. And you remember that the Korean Song master spoke of turning light inward and tracing the radiance down to its source. This is what we are doing through our Zazen. This is vital. It is the process that gradually frees us from being caught in our blind sights. If they could eliminate all conceptual thinking, this source would appear like the sun rising through the empty sky and illuminating the whole universe. If he could eliminate all conceptual thinking. That sounds harsh. And we're not talking about eliminating all conceptual thinking. We're talking about seeing through conceptual thinking, recognizing when it might be useful and when it might be way out to lunch. We're not trying to cut our thoughts. We're sinking beneath them, deep into the depths of our being, beyond words, beyond thoughts, where the truth lies, unvarnished. It's difficult for a while, and that while can be years, but it is so immensely worth going for it. We're blind for a long time. We're feeling our way in the dark. But gradually we begin to get a sense of things. And through that sense, we're gaining confidence that we can let go our intellectual ideas about what is and what isn't, and allow our body to receive and experience and give us a deeper truth about what is happening. Therefore, you students of the Tao who seek to understand through seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing, when your perceptions are cut off, your way to mind will be cut off, and you will find nowhere to enter. So you don't want to cut off your perceptions. You don't want to try not to see, not to hear, not to think, not to feel. Rather, you want to feel your way through, into. You can also use sound. There are many accounts of Zen masters, not yet masters, Zen students, who have come to awakening through sound. There is Kyogen, who was pondering this question for years, feeling like he was not good enough to actually live in a monastery. This is in China again. And so he thought, well, at least I can take care of this grave of this forgotten master. And so every day he was sweeping, cleaning, picking up, and all the time pondering wordlessly that question of his. And one day the broom hit a tile and flung it into a bamboo grove, and it went tak. And that sound awakened him. Hakuin, doing deep zazen, was awakened by the sound of the temple bell one early morning. As for sight, Rayun was awakened by the sight of the peach blossoms blooming. When we are ripe, anything can awaken us. But we ripen not by shutting down our senses. And this is really, really important, because in the old days, it was taught that we had to cut everything away. And what it really meant was not to cut our thoughts, not to cut our hearing, but to cut our attachment to it. To sink beneath, to allow the hearing to take place, but not to be caught in it. And the more we do our zazen, the more we're able to live like that, which also transfers into our daily life, so that we're not caught by circumstances as strongly as we would have been otherwise. Just realize that although mind is manifested in these perceptions, it is neither part of them nor separate from them. Although mind is manifested in hearing, seeing, feeling, tasting, touching, thinking even, it's not it. And it's not separate either. So how can something be not separate but not be something as well? That is the condition with Mu. Does a dog have the Buddha nature? No. Does the dog have the Buddha nature? Yes. At the same time. How can something have the Buddha nature at the same time and not have it at the same time? How can form be empty and emptiness be form? These are good questions to plumb beyond words. You shouldn't try to analyze these perceptions or think about them at all, but you shouldn't seek the one mind apart from them. Don't hold on to them or leave them behind or dwell in them or reject them. Above, below, and around you, all things spontaneously exist because there is nowhere outside of mind. There is nowhere outside of mind. Take that into your practice and let that sink beneath the level of the words. And use that perplexity to reach deeper. Use the extended out-breath to carry that perplexity to reach deeper. In these last hours of sesshin, and hopefully many of you will be sitting all night long, because even when you get sleepy, you go through a period of sleepiness and then you begin to wake up and you can go deeper. But remember, this mind is all things and yet nothing. It is you and it is not separate you from you. And you are not it, and yet it is not separate from you. In this way, gradually you will go deeper and deeper and deeper until you forget yourself so completely that awakening will take place naturally without any attempt to make it happen, because if you try to make it happen, it won't. So in these last hours of sesshin, we have just a little bit more than 12 hours left. And you have done so much work leading up to this. You can continue to take it so much deeper. It is invaluable. This is the most incredible part of sesshin. So we'll stop now so that you can continue to deepen immeasurably. I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.